Welcome, Starfinders. Today we're diving into the rich history of the pactworlds, the heart of the Starfinder universe. From ancient civilizations and the mysterious gap to the rise of powerful planetary alliances, this history shapes the adventures and conflicts of today. Let's explore how the pactworlds became the center of intergalactic civilization. The Gap. It all begins with one of the greatest mysteries in the universe. The Gap. No one knows exactly what caused it, how long it lasted, or why it happened. But when it ended, vast amounts of history had simply vanished. Civilizations across the galaxy woke up one day with no knowledge of their pasts. They retained their technology, magic, and knowledge of the present, but the past? Gone. Even the gods refused to reveal the truth of the Gap, but one thing is certain. It reshaped the galaxy. Societies scrambled to rediscover their identities, and old rivalries reignited in the absence of memory. The Gap's influence was total and multifaceted, affecting not only written records, but also memory, personal experiences, and divine knowledge. The effects on recorded history. Historical archives, digital databases, ancient tomes, and even technological databanks were corrupted or erased. There are no intact records of events that occurred during the Gap, and documents from before the Gap are unreliable or missing altogether. Some artifacts or structures from pre-Gap times still exist, but their origins and significance are impossible to trace. These relics are tantalizing clues to a forgotten past, but their meanings are shrouded in mystery. The effects on personal memory. The Gap affected the memories of sentient beings. No one remembers events from the Gap period, and even personal recollections are scrambled, as if they were erased or altered. Those who were alive before and during the Gap have no recollection of their lives or actions from that time. The effects on divine knowledge. Even the gods are seemingly affected by the Gap. When questioned about what occurred during this period, most divine beings either remain silent or claim ignorance. This has led to great theological debate among scholars and worshippers, with some questioning their god's omniscience. The disappearance of Galarian. One of the most striking events associated with the Gap is the disappearance of Galarian, the ancestral world of many species within the pactworlds, including humans, elves, dwarves, and others. Galarian was the central planet in the Pathfinder universe, the setting for countless historical events. However, during the Gap, Galarian mysteriously vanished without a trace. Key details about Galarian's disappearance. Absalom Station in its place. Where Galarian once existed in the Pactworld system, now orbits Absalom Station, a massive space station that serves as the political and cultural hub of the Pactworlds. The transition from Galarian to Absalom Station occurred sometime during the Gap, but no one remembers how or why. Severed connection. No divine entity, historian, or artifact has been able to explain where Galarian went or whether it still exists somewhere in the universe. Even the gods are silent on the matter, fueling rumors that it was transported to another dimension or destroyed during the Gap. Galarian's legacy. Despite the planet's disappearance, its cultural and historical influence remains strong. The languages, cultures, and myths of Galarian's people have survived into the modern era, even though their homeworld has not. The end of the Gap and the start of AG. In year 0 AG of Absalom Reckoning, the Gap ended. Historical records and personal memories resumed from this point, and the universe began to rebuild its knowledge of the past, though many gaps and mysteries still persist. The establishment of a new calendar beginning with the end of the Gap became known as After Gap, or 0 AG, marking the first year of the new era. Effects of the Gap's end. Fragmentary knowledge. Many societies retain fragments of knowledge about their own pre-gap history, but these are often incomplete and contradictory. For instance, some ancestries remember cultures and technology, but the specifics are often unclear. Rebuilding societies. Most civilizations emerge from the gap with their technology, magic, and infrastructure intact, but lacking the historical context of how these things developed. This led to a period of rediscovery as societies sought to reconstruct their histories and identities. The Pact World system includes the Sun. Yes, the Sun. I shall explain later. Abalon, the planet closest to the Sun, often called the Forge, is located just inside the orbit of Castrovel and home to an entire ecosystem of self-replicating robot creatures and sentient mechanical species called anicytes. Castrovel, the second planet, is a jungle world of extreme plant and animal life that is often referred to as the Wild, home to the elves, Lashunta, and Formians. Absalom Station, the huge space station the size of a planet that mysteriously replaced old Galarian, home to denizens of nearly every ancestry, but mostly humans. Akaton, the third planet, often called the Red Planet, whose desolate landscape made it impossible to support most forms of life due to the lack of atmosphere and solar winds. Home to contemplatives, who are basically just huge brains. Verces is the fourth planet in the Pact World system. It is tidally locked, causing one side to perpetually bake under the sun, named Fulbright, and the other to freeze in its shadow, called Darkside. Home to the Verthani, who were quick to discover interstellar travel to escape their harsh world. Verthani are 8 feet tall humanoids with delicate features, gangly limbs, and mouse-like eyes that are pure black. The pigment of their skin can be changed. Young Verthani display bright, expressive patterns and colors depending on their mood, while adults can control them at will. The Kasathan world ship Idari, which functions as their new home. Eox, the ravaged, lifeless, undead planet home to the Necrovites, or Bone Sages. All types of undead can be found here, who subsist on synth flesh, which keep them from harming other ancestries for sustenance. The Diaspora, the asteroid belt between worlds that is home to the Sarcesians, a large, lanky ancestry with butterfly-like wings made of pure light. Their wings act as solar sails, catching currents of radiation to propel them between the handful of inhabited asteroids and space platforms within the Diaspora. Lyavara, a gas giant, home to the Dreamers who live on floating platforms within the gaseous world and its many shepherd moons. Although they hold immense psychic power, they will not use it unless threatened. Brethida, a gas giant even more immense than Lyavara, often called the Cradle due to its numerous moons caught in orbit, and not all of them have been explored. Home to the Barathu, an ancestry of alien that closely resembles a jellyfish and form collectives valuing unity over independent thought. They are able to edit their own genetic code. Also, Hans, an ancestry that closely resembles humanoid spiders that resides within as well. Triaxis, a planet with a highly eccentric orbit that is home to dragons, dragonkin, and Rhyphorians, where the seasons can last for centuries. Aposte, believed to be a rogue planet before caught in the sun's gravity due to a highly ecliptic orbit now, is home to cavern elves, orcs, and Dromar. In fact, the planet itself doesn't seem to be natural at all, suggesting it was created similar to a generational ship. Think Darklands from Pathfinder, with most of the populace living in subterranean tunnels due to the planet lacking an atmosphere. The only point of entry to these tunnels is a city called Night Arch, fervently controlled by the Cavern Elves who do not welcome visitors. A planet-sized egg called Octurne, the farthest celestial body from the Pact World Sun, and important for reasons we will discuss in the future. It is home to cultists that worship the outer gods, similar to Elder mythos, and strange ancient entities from the Dark Tapestry called the Dominion of the Black. In 3 AG, Triune reveals itself and gifts the drift technology to the universe. This sets the precedence for all exploration within the Starfinder universe. The drift is a transitive plane that connects every point in the galaxy. The galaxy's inhabitants traverse the drift as a form of faster-than-light travel. Drift beacons, scattered across the galaxy, allow mortals to move starships through the drift and across large distances in short periods of time. These beacons serve as navigational buoys and are placed by priests of Triune or are spontaneously generated. The most prominent and least understood of these beacons is the Starstone at the center of Absalom Station. Its extraordinary power allows drift-capable ships to use it for fast transit from drift-accessible locations to the hub. Even though Triune is a single entity, each of its 3 component deities retain their unique personalities and portfolios, and have their own sets of worshippers dedicated to them. Triune was formed 3 years after the end of the gap in the pactworlds system, 3 AG, when Epoch ascended to godhood and sought out other deities like itself. For centuries, the Anacites of Abalon in the pactworlds system worked on and maintained an enormous city-sized neural network in the hopes that they could create an artificial god in their own image. They succeeded in the end, but the fledgling deity immediately sought out those like it, the ancient goddess Bree and the divine artificial intelligence Cassandali, and together they merged to form a new deity, Triune. Epoch became a mere aspect of the Gestalt Triune, although it maintains its own personality, priorities, and worshippers. For more information on Bree and Cassandali, see Podfinder's God Highlights and Deity Specifics. Immediately after its emergence, Triune revealed itself and broadcast the signal across the universe. The signal provided not only schematics for constructing drift engines, granting inexpensive, faster-than-light travel to every species capable of interpreting this knowledge, but revealed the previously unknown plane of the drift. This plane could not be accessed via magic, but only through technology. By offering drift engine technology to mortals, Triune became one of the most powerful deities in the Great Beyond, and its worship has spread rapidly through the pactworlds system and beyond. The Veskarium did not benefit from the broadcast of the signal, and was without drift technology until much later. Shirrens were once part of the Swarm, a monstrous locust-like race that traveled from world to world, consuming all it encountered before moving on. The Swarm are a hive mind ancestry built and constructed for the singular purpose of assimilation. They are a force beyond any current technological level and use sheer numbers to overcome their foes. If ever faced with a foe they cannot defeat, they evolve, often from assimilating the new species and rework components to add biological distinctiveness to the collective. Oftentimes, Swarm will hijack ships and crash into worlds they are returning to. Unaware scientists are often the cause of this, and Swarm components and eggs can appear as new unidentified species, making them tempting targets to bring aboard for research missions. Something the Swarm is all too aware of and exploits to take control of a ship after a few short weeks without risking high-priority components. Think the Borg from Star Trek, but instead of technology, they exclusively deal in biological evolution and perfection. They often resemble insects, with chitinous exoskeletons and multiple limbs. Sometime before the gap, a mysterious mutation caused an entire sub-colony to break from the Swarm's hive mind, with each of its members gaining a sense of self. Addicted to the new drug of individualism, these renegades rejected the Swarm's mindless consumption, forming a new race called Shirrens. As the Swarm continued its consumption, the Shirrens bid their time in the eventual hope of escape. After the gap ended, the Shirrens took advantage of the ensuing confusion among the swarm to flee in rudimentary biomechanical starships. Not accustomed to having its own components going rogue, the swarm put its entire strength to chasing the Shirrens. For 3 years, the Shirrens were relentlessly pursued by the swarm, only stopping briefly to gather resources or repair damaged ships. They tried to avoid populated areas so they would not be responsible for the extinction of others, but even when the Shirrens pressed close to such places, the swarm ignored them to focus on the chase and returning their wayward components. The Shirrens lost nearly a third of their population during the hundreds of skirmishes that took place in this time. When Triune revealed the drift to the galaxy, the Shirrens saw a way to escape the swarm for good. And after a year, they managed to develop a drift engine that was installed on their starships. The Shirren captain Sir Saptu and her crew on Freedom's Echo gave their lives to distract the swarm and ensure that the rest of the species could escape into the drift. The Shirren's first drift jump took them into a solar system just outside the swarm's telepathic sensor range. When gathering resources for their next jump, they found a comet with powerful energy signatures. On the comet, the goddess Hylax manifested before the gathered Shirren miners. Having watched their struggle and willingness to sacrifice themselves for others, Hylax welcomed them to her fold, granting them techniques to resist the swarm's influence and bolster their independence. Many Shirrens converted to Hylax's faith and built a monastery known as the Forever Reliquary on the comet, which they consider a sacred site. The Shirren then arrived at the Susquehan system. Some of them were unsure if they would be accepted. Others were certain that the humans would understand their peaceful intentions, and yet others wanted to settle in an uninhabited system. The Shirrens thus split into 3 groups. The first and smallest group came to Utranius, the habitable but uninhabited 3rd planet in the Susquehan system. After less than 3 years, they discovered the planet's porous ground made life difficult, and left Utranius to join their cousins elsewhere. The second group found themselves welcomed by the humans of Susquehan, and introduced their faith and drift engines to their new neighbors. Since then, they have made a significant minority in Susquehan's population, and the anniversary of their arrival is celebrated in a festival called Day of First Contact. The third group left Susquehan's system to search for an uninhabited system for themselves. After charting a large number of unsuitable planets, in 7 AG they named and began settling Ilim Chuva, the 3rd planet in an uninhabited system dubbed Chuva. The Bone Sages were once a human-like race known as the Eoxians. Though relatively frail, they were uniformly brilliant, and their technological achievements were some of the greatest Galarian solar system had ever seen. However, with these achievements came a pervasive sense of superiority and drive to dominate. And somewhere along this path, Eox was stricken by a world-shattering calamity. It is possible the gods sought to punish the Eoxians' hubris, but most believe this tragedy was self-inflicted, possibly recoil from the weapon that destroyed their greatest rivals, the twins, Diamar and Iovo, and created the Diaspora. The Magefire Assault was an attack launched by the Bone Sages of Eox on Absalom Station in 7 AG. It ended with the Eoxian forces defeated by the space station's formidable defenses. This failed attack on Absalom Station had longer-ranging repercussions. Several of the Eoxian admirals who had fought in this conflict held a grudge against the living inhabitants of the Galarian system. Decades later, when the Absalom Pact was signed in 41 AG, creating a unified, if loosely structured, system-wide confederation, these admirals refused to subordinate their ships to outside control. Remembering their defeat at the hands of soft and fragile living creatures, they staged an unsuccessful coup against their own Bone Sage government, and eventually fled the system to form the Corpse Fleet. The Veskarium is a military interplanetary empire located primarily in the Gavaniska system in near space, a term describing nearby systems to the Pact worlds. The Gavaniska system is the nearest inhabited solar system to the Pact worlds, while the Veskarium is named after its dominant species, the Vesk. Vesk are a reptilian ancestry who love combat and conquering, similar to how Klingon society works in Star Trek. Like Klingons who favor a batholith, Vesk also have a favored weapon called a Doshko, a metal shaft that produces 3 plasma blades, similar to how a lightsaber ignites, and is swung like a 2-handed axe. When the gap ended, the Veskarium's military records provided a clear snapshot of the pre-gap situation, allowing the Veskarium to quickly contact the existing Vesk garrisons on the conquered planets and reassert its control within 10 years. It is important to note that this reconquering of the Gavaniska system adds both Skittermanders and Pantra ancestries to the Veskarium. Skittermanders resembling Disney Stitch from Vesk 3, and Pantra, a more jungle-like catfolk from Vesk 6. The historical records of the Vesk suffer the same amnesia due to the gap as everyone else, with an exact recent history that only stretches back a bit over 3 centuries. For some reason, in 3 AG, Triune's signal did not reach the Veskarium, which had no access to the drift until explorers from the Galarian system first made contact in 12 AG. The Vesk initially warmly welcomed the visitors, but soon started to see the Galarian system as their next potential conquest. Relations deteriorated until the Veskarium attacked Triaxis in 36 AG, initiating the Silent War. The conflict led to various planets of the Galarian system to unite into a single government known as the Pact Worlds. The war lasted for approximately 250 years, and was mostly marked by border skirmishes, since neither side wanted to risk a full-scale invasion. Gaskar 3 is the watery, storm-racked third planet in the Gaskar system, home to all kinds of exiles, most notably Vesk, who reject the Veskarium's ideals and call themselves renunciants. Gaskar 3's landmass is concentrated in the small, calm rocky lowlands and river valleys of western Livonia. Smugglers and criminals view Gaskar 3 as an ideal place to lie low due to its treacherous seas and storms. Although the renunciants credit Waydin with allowing them to escape the Veskarium, rationalists have pointed out that Gaskar 3 provides an easy way for the Veskarium to get rid of troublesome dissidents. The Veskarium only pursues these exiles if they are criminals, and even then they prefer to hire freelance bounty hunters to capture them. The renunciants hold little ill will towards the Veskarium and tolerate these abductions to keep the peace. Gaskar 3 has a diverse ecosystem, and its wildlife have evolved to tolerate its storms. Some of them, like the Peskari and the Rygar, can grow to gargantuan sizes. In addition to the Vesk renunciants, many individuals from across the galaxy have migrated to Gaskar 3 in search of a freewheeling, whimsical society. The Battle of Eldra was the attack of the Veskarium in 36 AG on Triaxis. The battle is named after the mountaintop city of Eldra, where the first landfall was made, and marked the beginning of the Silent War. At the time of the invasion, there was no unified government along with the planets of the Galarian system. The Battle of Eldra was won by an alliance of forces from several planets in the Galarian system. This and subsequent clashes led to the signaling of the Absalom Pact, forming a unified government among the planets of the Galarian system, the Pact Worlds, in 41 AG. The Absalom Pact, sometimes simply known as the Pact, is the agreement on which the Pact Worlds government is based. Formed in 41 AG in response to the Veskarium's aggression towards the Galarian system, the Absalom Pact bound all worlds in the system in a mutual defense and governance agreement. The pact was created 5 years after the Battle of a Vesk ambush of the Triaxian cities of Eldra. Concerned that the disparate worlds of the Galarian system could not defend itself against the Veskarium, officials from Absalom Station, Castrovel, and Verces proposed a system-wide alliance based on Versi's multilateral Ring of Nations government. To the surprise of many, it was not logical Abalon or pacifist Brethida that signed up first, but the mistrusted undead planet of Eox, who quickly agreed to the plan, and the remaining worlds soon fell in line. Backed by the military power of the Bone Sages of Eox and supported by the financial and religious power of the churches of Abadar and Iomedae, the coalition quickly grew to encompass the entire system in the course of a few short years. Not everyone in the Galarian system was happy with the signing of the Absalom Pact and the creation of a system-wide confederation. Several admirals and Eox's powerful navy, still fuming after their defeat in the Magefire assault of 7 AG, refused to subordinate themselves to and protect soft and fragile living creatures. They attempted to seize control of several key Eoxian settlements, as well as the Sentinel, an ancient battle satellite, and stage an unsuccessful coup against the Bone Sages. Those who were not killed or captured fled the system to become the Corpse Fleet, a dangerous military force that continues to threaten the destruction of all life in the Pact worlds until this day. Each world in the Pact retains its own independent government, making the Pact worlds a confederation rather than a fully unified system-wide government. Some rights are granted and enforced universally for all sentient beings, with additional rights given to citizens of the Pact worlds, but other matters of law are left to its members to manage their own. The Pact members ultimately retain their sovereignty, and the Pact world's government claims no authority over worlds outside of the Galarian system unless they request it and are granted it by the members. The Stewards. Pact world policies are enforced by the Stewards, who also serve as diplomats for all member governments and its citizens. They prefer to solve conflicts through negotiation rather than military force, largely in an effort to maintain the fragile equilibrium between the member states. The Pact Council and Directorate. Decisions within the Pact are made by the Pact Council, an elected body that meets in the vast and senatorial building called the Planera on Absalom Station. Each world of the Pact receives proportional number of delegates to its sentient population, and many matters are decided by direct vote of the Council. Matters of great importance to the Pact as a whole, as well as deadlocks, are voted on by the Directorate, a leadership committee of 5 members chosen from the wider Pact Council body every 2 years. No planet may have more than one representative to the Directorate, and its membership is therefore a hotly contested issue. The Stewards choose an additional 6th member of the Directorate known as the Director General, although this member is included only to advise the Directorate and carry out its edicts and has no voting rights. Non-world members. Corporations and religious organizations are not full members, but many actively lobby and advocate their causes to voting members. The Aspis Consortium is a unique exception to this restriction. The Pact World's government granted the Aspis Consortium status of a Pact World in thanks to the organization for actions when the Swarm first attacked the Pact Worlds. Though not allowed to vote, the Consortium is recognized as a self-governing entity, and its holdings on various worlds seen as embassies, and its agents largely granted diplomatic immunity within other worlds' jurisdictions. In 41 AG, after the planets of the Galarian system unified under the Pact World's government against the Veskarium, the Council of Despots became concerned that the Veskarium's technology might fall behind that of the Pact Worlds, like how they missed Triune Signal in 3 AG. Emperor Rakakama III thus decreed the construction of the Conqueror's Forge, which was completed and named in 47 AG after the Vesk's patron deity Damoritosh. The Conqueror's Forge is a space station and shipyard where new technology, weapons, and starships are designed for the army of the Veskarium. It is outfitted with powerful engines that allow it to travel throughout the Govaniska system. The Conqueror's Forge was put in orbit around Vesk Prime and given the status of a core world. The Stardust Plague was a terrible pathogen that broke out in the Pact Worlds in 67 AG and ended up killing millions of individuals. Its devastation was thought to have been brought home and spread by unchecked exploration of the galaxy through the recently discovered means of drift travel. A dangerous and communicative disease spread through the air, Stardust Plague is a potent potential bioweapon, and as such was contained and all but eradicated in the Pact worlds centuries ago. As part of this public health initiative, the Pact Council confiscated all vials of the plague for safekeeping. This included, of course, all private medical corporations researching the disease, such as HealthWorks Innovations Incorporated, who may have purposely kept a vial around for nefarious, or perhaps lucrative reasons. In 83 AG, a group of Shirrens picked up an unnaturally strong signal that turned out to be the Starstone at the heart of Absalom Station. As they emerged into the Pact World system, which was still recovering from the Stardust Plague, and expecting another Veskarium attack, the Shirrens were surprised by how multiple species could act together for mutual defense and governance. They managed to convince the Pact Worlds of their peaceful intention and sent a delegation to meet the Pact Council and the stewards in Absalom Station, where they introduced their history and warned the Pact Worlds about the swarm threat. The Pact Council welcomed the Shirrens into the Pact Worlds, and Verces offered them a stretch of the Tamora Desert in Fulbright where they could settle. In 154 AG, androids gained civil rights and citizenship in the Pact Worlds, though this does not apply to everywhere in the galaxy. Androids are complex technological creations crafted to resemble humans. Having mastered the art of technology, androids were soon manufactured by other ancestries in factories after the gap, and used as cheap labor with no thought put into their treatment. Androids, and android abolitionists, having fought for over a century and a half, secured androids' recognition in the Pact Worlds, with fair and equal treatment to other ancestries. The Burning Archipelago is a collection of inexplicable and, until roughly a century ago, abandoned cities encased within magically protective bubbles that are tethered together and float unburnt within the Pact World sun's flaming corona. The Burning Archipelago was discovered in 223 AG by Serenite scholars orbiting and observing the sun. Shortly after its discovery, the Serenite priestess Imril Novarhart had a vision of walking through its streets and knew that Serenray was calling her there. She came to Sunrise Station and managed to convince some of the crew to travel to the Burning Archipelago, according to Serenray's will. As their ship started to fail due to the extreme heat and gravity, the tunnel to the Burning Archipelago suddenly opened, allowing them to pass into Dawn Shore safely. Sister Novahart discovered and named the Radiant Cathedral in her speech under the prominence. As the speech was broadcast to the Pact Worlds, it triggered a mass migration to the Burning Archipelago. Although it is still not known who or what originally built the cities or why they were abandoned, the bubble cities quickly became the Church of Serenray's most sacred settlement. It was around this time I suspect the end of the Stardust Plague occurred, as Serenray, being the goddess of the sun and healing, would have influenced Novahart to seek out the hidden cathedral and archives in an effort to end the disease. It also helps establish why so many Serenites arrive so quickly to pool their resources and efforts, effectively establishing some of the best medical facilities and unified effort to combat future outbreaks from the lack of regulations and customs that were present at the start of drift exploration. The Idari is a massive Kasathan generation sub-light speed starship located in the Pact World system, orbiting the sun between Verces and the Diaspora. It originated from the planet Kasath and traveled to the Pact World system, arriving in 240 AG. It is largely inhabited by Kasathas and is a full member of the Pact Worlds. Kasathas are a race of four-armed humanoids native to the desert planet Kasath. Their home-world star is dying, and they consolidated the entirety of their ancestry onto a world ship called the Idari to settle in the Pact World system. Even though their resettlement did not go as originally planned, they have since spread out to become some of the most commonly encountered species in the Pact Worlds. Shortly after the gap, the Witchweirds visited Kasath and told the Kasathas of Akaton, a perfect planet to colonize after they have fled their dying homeworld. Witchweirds are an ancestry of four-armed, avid wanderers and itinerant traders, crossing unimaginable distances to trade in every corner of all planes of existence, including the universe, formerly the material plane. Determined to settle this promised land, the Kasathas began construction of the Idari, a great, slower-than-light generation ship that would take centuries to reach their destination. Arrived in the Pact World system in 240 AG, but found that Akaton was too populous and local technology had become too advanced during their long travel, rendering an invasion risky. A diplomatic delegation from the Pact Council, backed by the entire Pact Worlds fleet, dissuaded the Kasathas from their original intent of conquest. Instead, some of the Kasatha emigrated peacefully to other worlds, while the Idari moved to take up an orbit around the sun between Verces and the diaspora, and was later admitted into the Pact Worlds as a member. The Azlanti Star Empire is a multi-system government located near the Hydra Nebula of the Vast that was founded by humans that originally came from Azlant, the first great human empire on Golarion. They are driven by the belief that pure-blooded Azlanti humans are the most perfect species and seeks to bring all others beneath their rule. Millennia before the gap, thousands of colonists from Azlant followed the governor Iron Estria through magical portals to New Thespera, a distant planet orbiting the star Aristia. The portals failed after a few months, stranding the pioneers on New Thespera for the rest of their lives. Iron Estria was determined to see her colony thrive on this distant planet and founded a new Azlanti empire for the great purpose of carrying on the Azlanti traditions, culture, learning, and philosophy, eventually spreading to the stars. Her vision was acclaimed by the colonists, and she became the first imperator of the Azlanti Star Empire. With their advanced magic and technology, the colonists settled across New Thespera and established a new bastion of Azlanti civilization. Ironestria extended her lifespan far beyond the human average, but she died before the Star Empire could expand to other planets. Due to a considerable loss of magical and technological expertise, her successors continued her work and created their own destiny without the malignant influence of the Algoliths, like on Azlant. In bygone millennia, aquatic monsters known as Algoliths used their occult powers to conquer and rule vast parts of the world in Old Golarion. Their empires contained countless mortal slaves treated as little more than cattle. Algolthu shaped their slaves and other creatures using mental manipulation and physically transformative magic. Aberrant horrors from faceless stalkers to mimics can be traced back to this meddling. The rulers of the Algolthu race, the so-called Veiled Masters, further shaped entire societies by assuming the forms of those they controlled, similar to old Azlant. From the heights of power to the shadows of poverty, the Veiled Masters manipulated these societies according to their own dark designs, enslaving, killing, and horrifically transforming those who discovered their plans or acted against them. See Mythkeeper's The Veiled Masters and the Algolthu Creature feature for more detailed information beyond the baseline I've provided you. The Imperator drafted a formal charter to provide resources for space exploration programs, split between Scientific Exploration and Expansion Bureau, and the Aeon Exploitation Office, which explored technological and magical approaches respectively. Both managed to send unmanned craft to suborbital space, but were all destroyed upon re-entry. Fed up with stagnation and infighting, the Imperator consolidated the AEO and the SEEB into the Imperial Space Agency, which managed to combine concepts from its constituent groups into an orbital platform that can be recovered. the ISA developed the very first Aeronaut suit. The first crewed mission ended when a fault in the gyroscope tore the ship apart and killed the pilot. In 259 AG, the Veskarium colony of Najin Korozeus unknowingly built near the Star Empire-controlled space. The Star Empire easily conquered the colony, and its entire population was enslaved or slaughtered. A Starfinder Society scout ship exploring the vast made first contact with the Star Empire in 269 AG, and the Star Empire promptly destroyed it. Every interaction between the Pact Worlds or the Veskarium and the Star Empire since has ended in similarly efficient and overwhelming violence. No ship has survived direct contact with the Star Empire, including 2 Pact Worlds diplomatic envoys. In addition to the Pact Worlds and the Veskarium, the Azlanti have also learnt about the Shadari Confederacy and the Rikrichis. Rikrichis are an intelligent race of mollusk-like deep space dwellers native to the ocean planet Achios. Rikrichis made contact with explorers from the Pact World system in 268 AG, and by this time they had already developed complex astronomic theories. Although the Rikrichis still only used simple tools, they had academic aptitude and quickly understood and adopted to the visitors' technologies. Lashuntas are a species of humanoids native to the planet Castroville. They are psychics with a unique self-determined subspecies and are a prominent population in the Pact Worlds. On their home planet of Castroville, the Lashunta were at war for thousands of years before the gap with another native species, the Formians. Formians resemble giant ants with humanoid upper bodies. Their exoskeleton is carved with images reflecting their name and achievements, similar to tattoos. This contact did not come to an end until 287 AG, when Shirren diplomats brokered a peace treaty. This event is believed to have been necessary for the foundation of the Pact Worlds government in 291 AG. In 291 AG, both the Veskarium and the Pact Worlds were invaded by an extrasolar enemy known as the Swarm. This mutual threat forced the Veskarium to negotiate an armistice with the Pact Worlds that ended the Silent War. Together, the Veskarium and the Pact Worlds drove out the Swarm, but since the threat of the Swarm endures, the armistice remains in effect. The Swarm War ends. After exhausting much of the Veskarium's resources in the rebuilding of the Conqueror's Forge and having to ally with the Pact Worlds rather than conquering them, the former Emperor of the Vesk abdicated in lieu of suffering the political fallout of being unable to maintain the desired image of the Empire. In 319 AG, after Suscalon was overrun by the Swarm, most of its surviving citizens fled to Utranius and took refuge in New Krakak. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through the history of the Pact Worlds, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more Starfinder content. Stay tuned for more lore, gameplay tips, and insights into Starfinder 2nd Edition, and maybe even some live plays. Until next time, keep exploring the stars.